Hey everybody. Tonight what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going over with you my view of how the universe is constructed. Now, I know that none of us are ever going to know completely. There is a mystery, and the mystery starts becoming more of a mystery as we try to get closer and closer to what some of us call God, but some of us call a divine consciousness, which is the very start of where consciousness begins. And we're going to go into that in just a little bit. I thought this would be great material to discuss just before the show tomorrow. So if we have any callers that would like to call in and say anything about this, they're more than welcome to. So why is it that we see the Orion Nebula in all of these churches, but not only in just the churches? We also see pointers to this in many other places, as I've shown you before. For example, there are various other artists completely outside of the church that have drawn things that are basically abstract reminders that point us in a direction to better understand things. And I believe that is reality as well, which I'm going to also go into. This is just random art from somebody else that doesn't have anything to do with the church at all. This is art by Michelangelo showing the Orion Nebula as being God. But we're going to go into what God actually means here in just a little bit. And that's where I think a lot of people are getting confused. And hopefully what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to pull on famous philosophers. I'm going to pull from various religious beliefs. We're going to go across cultures. We're going to take a look at science, reality science, consciousness. We're going to kind of go all over the place because that is really the way to get to the truth. Not to stay in your own little reality tunnel, per se, but to understand that there are other points of view. One of the definitions of consciousness is to understand, or to understand you're being conscious, and at that point you are raising your awareness. Here is the ancient Hopi ruins, as I've shown you before, that were modeled after Orion. And everything points to Orion. And we see that all over the place, but it's not some huge conspiracy because it's not tied with the church. The church doesn't get along with the Hopi. The church doesn't get along with the Mayans. So we have this thing all around the world that's all pointing to Orion. And we need to find out why. And I'm going to show you in this presentation. So a lot of you have heard the phrase, "we are one." And the problem is that nobody actually goes into detail about what that actually means, or at least not many people that I've heard of, as well as defining what love is and things like that. They always just say, you need to know who you are. Well, why don't you give us a clue? Well, I'm going to try to do that for you. I've just played you some Alan Watts, okay? And so what you have to understand that we are one, when you take a look at the fingerprint of the universe and the way that divine consciousness exposes itself, is it follows a certain sequence. You see the tree right here, right? It follows the Fibonacci sequence, which is what you're looking at. And that starts out at 1, and then it goes to 2, and the sequence means that 2 is 1 plus 1, right? So the next one is 3, and that is 2 plus the one before that, which is 1, which is 3. And then you have 5, and that means 5 plus 3 gets you to 8. And the reason why that this sequence is so important, and one of the reasons why we have problems in our society today, is because we don't understand our past. It's important to understand your past. And that doesn't mean to just say things are the way they are and so forget about it. No, you need to understand your past, because everything that successfully expands consciousness or expands in the universe without failing does it in this manner. And what that basically means is you have to know what your past was in order to understand what your future was, or future is. So in order to know that I need to have 5 branches above the 3, I need to know that my previous number was 2. 2 plus 3 is 5. That's how I know to grow 5 branches. If I don't understand my past, then I don't know what to do in the next phase. And what is bound to happen eventually is that you're going to fail. Because you're going to grow maybe too many branches, things are going to get caught up, things aren't going to work right, or you're just going to circle around and do nothing because you don't know where you've been. So imagine the universe. Okay, the universe is growing. Okay, and so imagine that it started out a long time ago, and it started out as one singularity. And so what it did was it branched out. Imagine, for example, that, and we'll just start at this level, the level that we're familiar with, and that is the universal level. And so the universe, what it did was it split itself, and this is what we call duality. It split itself into duality. Now we're going to think of the physical right now, and we'll move to the mental here in just a minute. But imagine that it split itself into, say, for example, galaxy clusters. And then from there it split itself into singular galaxies. And then those galaxies contained nebulas. And those nebulas contained stars. And those stars contained planets. And so on and so forth, all the way down to the microscopic level. So really what you have going on is you have an infinity at the top, because we don't know where this starts. And we have an infinity at the bottom because we don't, that's what these guys at CERN don't understand, is you can keep splitting these particles as much as you want to, and you're always going to find that there's going to be something smaller that makes up that particle. So I don't buy their story about how they can find this God particle. Now, occult science, which we can also get into here in just a little bit, will discuss that at a certain level, what actually happens is consciousness itself creates these particles at the very low level. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit, which is called an anu. And we've talked about that before. But on the physical level, just imagine that the universe does that. It splits itself. It splits itself into galaxy clusters, galaxies, nebula, planets, people and life forms, cellular structures, atoms, quarks, so on. Okay, it just keeps going down. And so what you have to understand is that it not only does that in the physical sense, but it also does that in the sense of the soul and the mind. Now this is a little bit harder to explain, but I'm going to try to do that for you real quick. Now I'm going to pull you over here real quick to Sons of God, written by John J. Harper. And what do you see on the very first page? Man is the measure of all things, by Protagoras. And then by Leonardo da Vinci, which is probably the most intelligent person that's ever lived on this planet, the workings of the human body are an analogy for the workings of the universe. That is another way of saying as above, so below. By understanding the workings of the human body, you can understand things at a smaller or microcosm level, and you can understand how things work at a macrocosm level when you're taking a look at the universe. And so right below here, he says that the Great Pyramid of Giza contains the secret to the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth in our cosmos. So the riddle of the Sphinx. This article reveals that formula of reincarnation within the star clusters of the Orion Nebula. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. This isn't an Orion Nebula cult thing. What we're going to go over is we're going to go over an understanding of the way that the cosmos expands, both physically and consciously. And it says, in fact, the same story of creation embodied in our design of crop circles, sacred sightstone megaliths, and zodiac that speaks to our origins and destiny as a star-seeding civilization. Indeed, there is an ancient yet modern truth barcoded into our genes. The human soul is a magnetic monopole. As the Egyptians realized, our soul splits into twins, the Ka and Ba. These two bipolar entities, however, must be restored to integrity, wholeness, here and now, in order to open the stargates to our physical immortality. This is the meaning to what Jesus commanded in the Gospel of Thomas, make the two one again. He was speaking to the science of the soul, the Kabbalah. Before we go into the actual soul of the individual person, let's talk about something at a little bit higher level. Now, if you've watched my series called Know What Is in Front of Your Face, you know that there appears to have been some kind of a cover-up of the Orion Nebula on the western side of religion and the world, where the Vatican was. Because you got to remember that the Mayans and the American Indians, the Native Americans, they understood that the Orion Nebula, for example, existed long before they even were using telescopes. This was one of the first areas that that Galileo swept when he looked at Orion, and yet he on purposely didn't note it. And in fact, there wasn't anything written about it until a Jesuit priest decided to write about it and mentioned it ambiguously, in other words, vague. Didn't talk about it at all. The reason why, what they know about is that is where the world soul is seated. Now, what is the world soul? Now, you have to remember, you have to go all the way back to ancient Egypt. Okay, that's where we first find any religious text called the Pyramid Text. That's also where you hear the story of Osiris. And all across the various cultures, all of these different cultures understood the importance of Orion. More specifically, the Orion Nebula, which we're going to go into. The world tree, or the world soul, is where life sprouted both physically and consciously in that node of the larger universe. So, for example, this is a Fibonacci tree. Okay? This is the universe expanding into galaxies, and then into nebula, and then into planets, and so on. Okay? So what happens is, both physically and consciously, at each one of these nodes you have this explosion of physical reality and conscious reality. So, for example, at this node right here, let's call it the Orion Nebula because the galaxies were already formed. The Orion Nebula represents the world soul, which means it is a collection of all the souls that belong to our planet and any of the other planets or solar systems and life forms, consciousness that sprouted from that area. It's like a bud. It starts growing. And all it really is a pointer. It points you back. In other words, if we're down here on the planet, and all of us, we all broke up into individual souls and fragmented, and you can find this information everywhere, then the pointer, the reason why Orion is so important is the pointer, and just like the pharaohs believed that when they died, their souls went back up to live as stars with Osiris and Orion. What they're really saying is that the souls return back to that pointer. Now, at that point in time, you still have all the nebula that are associated with this galaxy, for example. Say this is a galaxy. This galaxy split into nebula. And those nebula split into various life forms and planets all over the place. So the galaxy would represent a galactic soul, which would be a combination of all of the nebulas that are out there associated with the sprouting of the node of this galaxy on the tree, both physically and consciously. So when we say that we're all one down here, but yet we're all still individuals up here. It's the same tree. That's what this basically means. So we are extensions of that divine consciousness. So imagine it this way. Imagine that you are, let's take it at our level. Let's imagine that we are at the top level, for example. And so we want to work out a problem in our head. Now, first of all, okay, what you're looking at right here is called the Kabbalion. This is ancient philosophy that dates all the way back to Egypt. For example, they understood that there were these different laws in the universe that existed. One of the first laws they talk about right here is called the mental universe. And what they say is the universe is mental, held in the mind of the all. What that basically means is at the very top of the chain, then